Hello, everyone. My name is Lynn Walsh, and I'm the Assistant Director at Trusting News. Today, we're going to talk about how you can build trust through your election and political coverage. At Trusting News, we look at research about why people distrust in news and information, and we use that to build up strategies and empower newsrooms to rebuild that trust and prevent distrust within their communities. One of the primary ways we do that is through encouraging journalists to be transparent by creating a mission statement for your election coverage and an FAQ page about your election coverage. That can be one way to be very transparent and get on the record about your goals and what you're trying to achieve. The first thing to keep in mind is that mistrust is often about misassumptions. That means people may distrust your information or your news content because they don't understand how it works. When they don't understand how it works, they make an assumption. Generally, that assumption is negative. Today, we're going to focus on how you can clear up those misassumptions about journalism, demystify your process and your mission, and do all of this by explaining your ethics and integrity, both proactively and defensively. All of this is about telling your own story. Why people should invest in you, why people should feel a connection to you, and why people should trust your team and your content and consume your content in the process. All of this is needed on two levels, institutionally and day-to-day. If you create a mission statement or an FAQ page, those are things that will provide transparency on an institutional level. We're talking about things you can communicate about your brand, your ethics, policies about corrections. Then the goal is getting those messages in day-to-day content. So what should a good mission statement include? Well, a good mission statement can take multiple forms, but there are some basic things that it should include. It should include the why, the how, the what. The why is the reason you do what you do. The how is the way you conduct your work. And the what is the actual thing you do. The mission statement is going to show that you have values, you have ethics, and you have goals. It's going to help you keep your coverage consistent and tied to those goals. It's also going to hold your newsroom accountable, both internally and externally, by getting on the record publicly and help your newsroom respond to comments from the community. When you have this content publicly available, it empowers the whole newsroom to explain and talk on behalf of the brand about how you have goals, what those goals are, and how you work to achieve them. So now let's look at some examples. Our first example is from Wyophile. They decided to put their mission statement into bullet form. They basically made a list of things that people can expect from their election coverage. They talk about how they're going to cover forums and debates. They're going to publish profiles of candidates. They're going to investigate big campaign donors. They're also going to answer readers' questions about how elections and the voting process work. One thing I love about this example is when they say that, they provide a link right there where people can submit a question they may have. This next example is from New Hampshire Latino News. They talk about how they're going to cover elections with collaboration, inclusion, and transparency in mind. Then they explain what that means. They talk about how they're not going to make assumptions about what communities need to know. They talk about how they will partner with trusted organizations, and that reporting is not just going to focus around the candidates or one day, election day, but rather voters in a year-round focus on the work of policymaking. In their mission statement, WUSF explains how their goal is to provide their community with accurate, honest journalism. They then talk about how their journalists are independent. This is important because this is something people will not assume. They might actually assume the opposite. By getting on the record and saying you are independent, it can help people have trust in your content and in your coverage. I love this last part here. They talk about how they're not going to chase politicians, but instead tell stories based on the questions you want answered. Something called the citizen's agenda approach, which you will learn more about throughout this course. A mission statement isn't going to be able to provide all of the information and answer all of the questions that your community may have about the decisions you're making about how to cover the election and how to cover certain candidates. That's where an FAQ page comes in. Going beyond a mission statement and creating an FAQ page allows you to expand and provide more information to your community about your priorities. It can answer questions like situations you won't cover, which candidates you're choosing to cover or focus more on, which candidates you aren't going to be focusing on because you don't have the resources. You can also explain where you get your sources from and the information from, and explain how you work to be fair and prevent bias. Let's look at this example from Colorado Public Radio. What's great about this is it starts out with their mission, a couple of sentences explaining what their goals are. But then it expands by listing questions that provide more information about their decision-making and their reporting process. What's great about this format is the questions have individual links. This accomplishes two things. It lets readers on the page skip to a section they're interested in, a specific question they're curious about. It also lets the staff use the links to answer specific questions as they come up in stories or social posts. One of the questions explains how they decide what to cover. In the explanation, they talk about how they ask themselves questions to help them make this decision. They ask themselves questions like, does this affect actual people? If so, how and how many? Does this help Coloradoans understand each other? Does it help them understand the issues? Is this information that readers and listeners are seeking at this moment? This is written in a way that is easy to understand and helpful for the community. So you may be wondering how to come up with questions to answer. Well, one way is to ask your audience. Ask them, what are they curious about? What do they want to know about your election process? What do they question about how you make decisions and why? Another strategy is to keep track of what you're receiving in comments or in direct reader or user feedback, whether those are questions or criticism. The goal with this is to turn assumptions, or those negative comments, into information gaps. So here's an example of what that could look like. Maybe someone puts a comment that looks like a complaint that says you cover this candidate more because you want her to win. Well, as responsible, ethical journalists, we know that's not the case. So instead, we could take that complaint and turn it into an information gap and into question form, and instead explain how you decide which races and candidates to focus coverage on. Then answer that question and make sure that you are consistent in your coverage moving forward. Mission statements and FAQ pages can look all sorts of different ways. The goal is to pick a way to get on the record that's going to work for you and your news team. The other important thing is to think about and be aware of what to expect once these are live. First and foremost, once this is public and you are publishing information about what your goals are, people are going to hold you accountable for that. That can be scary, but it also can be a really great thing. It can help lead to consistent coverage in your newsroom. It also involves the entire newsroom in this process and can empower them to talk on behalf of the brand. If you want more help creating a mission statement or an FAQ page, go to our Trust Kits page on our website. The Trust Kits will walk you through exactly how to do this and provide some potential questions you want to answer. It also will provide more newsroom examples to demonstrate how this could be done. And for even more help, we have a weekly newsletter called Trust Tips that comes out on Tuesdays that allows you to get weekly advice on building trust in your election coverage, but also in all of your coverage moving forward.